The first thing you need to understand about my marriage is that it had been running on autopilot for months before I found the phone. Mina and I had perfected the art of existing in the same house without really seeing each other. She had her yoga classes, her therapy sessions, her nonprofit work. I had my consulting business, my home office, and a growing collection of reasons to stay late at work. My name is Elias Corven, and 12 years ago, I was the guy who investigated doctors when they stepped out of line. Medical Licensing Board, State of Maine. I'd seen every kind of professional misconduct you could imagine, from billing fraud to boundary violations that would make your skin crawl. These days, I run compliance consulting for healthcare practices. Same skill set, better pay, fewer nightmares. The phone fell out of Mina's gym bag on a Tuesday evening in February. She'd just come back from what she called her therapy session, though she looked more like she'd been running wind sprints than processing childhood trauma. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair was messier than usual, and she had that particular glow that comes from physical exertion, or other activities. The phone hit our kitchen floor with a plastic clatter, sliding across the hardwood until it bumped against my foot. A basic flip phone, the kind you buy with cash at a convenience store. The kind people use when they don't want their regular phone to show certain calls or texts. "Wrong number," Mina said quickly, snatching it up before I could get a good look. "Just some telemarketer thing." "Weird that a telemarketer would make you smile like that," I said, keeping my tone light. "Must be selling something good." She shot me a look that could have frozen coffee. It wasn't a smile, I was annoyed. "My mistake. You always look that happy when you're annoyed." The thing about living with someone for 8 years is that you develop a radar for their lies. Mina's tells were subtle but consistent. She'd touch her earring when she was being evasive, and she'd over-explain simple things when she was hiding something bigger. Right now, she was doing both. "How was therapy?" I asked, opening the refrigerator to grab a beer. "Dr. Carrick helping you work through those trust issues?" "It was fine. We talked about boundaries." Boundaries. That's important. I twisted off the bottle cap, letting it fall into the sink with a tiny metallic ping. What kind of boundaries? Personal ones. You wouldn't understand. There it was again. The earring touch, followed by the dismissive comment designed to shut down conversation. Mina had been seeing Dr. Rowan Carrick for about 6 months, ever since she'd decided our marriage needed professional intervention. I'd offered to go with her, but apparently, this was something she needed to do alone. "Try me," I said. I'm pretty good with personal boundaries. Spent years investigating people who cross them. She was already heading toward the stairs, gym bag slung over her shoulder. "I'm going to shower. Don't forget to charge your phone," I called after her. "Both of them." Her step faltered for just a moment, but she didn't turn around. I stood in the kitchen drinking my beer and thinking about burner phones. In my experience, people carried them for 3 reasons. They were cheating, they were dealing something illegal, or they were afraid of someone. Mina didn't seem afraid, and she wasn't the type to deal anything stronger than essential oils. That left option 1. The water started running upstairs, and I found myself staring at the spot where the phone had landed. Mina had grabbed it fast, but not before I'd seen the screen light up with what looked like a text message, something with hearts or emojis, the kind of cutesy stuff that teenagers send each other, or that people send when they're having an affair. I finished my beer and went to my office, a converted bedroom at the back of the house where I kept my computer and filing cabinets. The room smelled like coffee and printer toner, familiar scents that usually helped me focus. Tonight, they just reminded me of all the nights I'd spent in here instead of talking to my wife. Maybe that was part of the problem. Maybe I'd been so busy building my consulting business that I'd stopped paying attention to what was happening in my own house. Mina had been distant for months, claiming she needed space to find herself. I'd assumed it was a midlife thing, the kind of temporary crisis that would resolve itself with time and professional help. Now I was wondering if she'd found herself in someone else's arms. The The shower was still running upstairs, which meant I had at least 10 minutes before Mina came back down. I opened my laptop and pulled up the search engine, typing in Dr. Rowan Carrick Therapist, Maine. His website was professionally designed, all earth tones and calming fonts. The photo showed a man in his early 40s, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of confident smile that probably made his female patients feel understood. His bio mentioned degrees from respectable schools, specializations in marriage counseling and personal growth, and a practice philosophy centered on authentic connection and emotional healing. Authentic connection, right. I clicked through to the reviews section, scanning the comments from former patients. Most were glowing, particularly from women who praised his intuitive approach and genuine care for his clients. Several mentioned feeling truly seen for the first time in their lives. One review caught my attention. Dr. Carrick changed my life in ways I never expected. He helped me understand that I deserved more than I was settling for. Our sessions were always the highlight of my week. The reviewer's name was listed as Jennifer M., and she'd given him 5 stars. I bookmarked the page and closed the laptop just as the water stopped running upstairs. A few minutes later, Mina came down wearing her robe, her hair wrapped in a towel. She looked relaxed now, the tension from earlier gone. "What are you working on?" she asked, glancing toward my office. "Client proposal, healthcare compliance stuff, nothing exciting." She nodded and headed toward the kitchen. "I'm making tea. Do you want some?" "Sure." It was the first normal interaction we'd had in weeks, and for a moment I wondered if I was being paranoid. Maybe the phone really was nothing. Maybe I was looking for problems that didn't exist. Then I noticed that she'd taken her gym bag upstairs with her, something she never did. Usually she left it by the door so she could grab it on her way out the next morning. "Mina," I said, following her into the kitchen. "Can I ask you something?" "What?" She was filling the kettle, her back to me. "Are you happy? With us, I mean. With our marriage." She set the kettle on the stove and turned around, studying my face. "Why are you asking?" "Because you seem different lately. Distant. Like you're somewhere else, even when you're here." "I'm working on myself, Elias. That's what therapy is for." "I know. I just want to make sure we're okay." She walked over and put her hand on my arm, the first time she'd touched me voluntarily in weeks. "We're fine. I just need some time to figure things out." "Figure what out?" "Who I am, what I want, what makes me happy." The kettle started whistling, and she turned away to deal with it. I watched her move around the kitchen, noting the way she avoided eye contact, the way her shoulders stayed tense despite her reassuring words. "How long do you think that will take?" I asked. "I don't know. These things can't be rushed." She handed me a mug of chamomile tea, and we sat at the kitchen table like we used to when we first moved into this house. Back then, we'd spend hours talking about our plans, our dreams, our future together. Now we could barely manage 10 minutes of small talk. "Dr. Carrick seems to be helping," I said, testing the waters. "He is. He's very insightful." "How often are you seeing him now?" "Twice a week. Sometimes more if I'm having a difficult time." That was news to me. I'd thought it was once a week, maybe twice at most. Therapy was expensive, and our insurance only covered a portion of it. "That's a lot of therapy," I said. "It's what I need right now." "Okay. I just want you to be happy." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I know. Thank you for being patient with me." We finished our tea in relative silence, and then Mina said she was tired and wanted to go to bed early. I told her I had a few more things to finish up in my office, which was true. I also wanted to think about what I'd learned tonight. After she went upstairs, I sat in my office and made a list of everything that had changed about Mina's behavior over the past few months. The increased therapy sessions, the new gym routine, the way she'd started dressing differently, choosing clothes that were more fitted, more flattering, the burner phone, and the way she'd looked when she came home tonight, flushed, energized, almost glowing. I'd seen that look before, years ago, when we first started dating. It was the look of someone who was falling in love. The question was, with whom? I had a pretty good idea, but I needed proof before I did anything about it. Fortunately, I knew exactly how to get it. The next morning, I waited until Mina left for her volunteer work at the animal shelter before I started making calls. My first contact was a former colleague named Rex Paulson, who'd left the fire department to start a private investigation business. We'd worked together on a few cases involving healthcare fraud, and he owed me a favor. "Elias Corven," Rex said when he picked up. "Haven't heard from you in months. How's married life treating you?" "That's actually why I'm calling. I need some advice about surveillance equipment." There was a pause. "Personal or professional?" "Let's call it professional development." Rex chuckled. "Right. What do you need to know?" "Hypothetically, if someone wanted to monitor text messages on a burner phone, what would be the best approach?" "Hypothetically, that someone would need physical access to the phone, which is usually a problem. But if they could get it for a few minutes, there are apps that can clone the data. Is this hypothetical someone tech-savvy?" "Moderately." "Then I'd recommend the simple approach. Most people don't bother with password protection on burner phones. If you can get your hands on it, just scroll through the messages and take photos with your regular phone. What about legal issues? Depends on whose phone it is and what you plan to do with the information. If it's your spouse's phone and you're looking at divorce proceedings, most lawyers would say you're within your rights to gather evidence of infidelity. But I'm not a lawyer." "Understood. Thanks for the advice." "Elias," Rex said before I could hang up, "be careful. Sometimes you find things you wish you hadn't." "I'll keep that in mind." After I hung up, I spent an hour researching Maine's laws regarding marital property and privacy rights. The good news was that spouses had fairly broad latitude when it came to investigating potential adultery, especially if they were considering divorce. The bad news was that anything I found would need to be obtained legally if I wanted to use it in court. Mina's schedule was predictable: animal shelter until noon, lunch with her friend Lana, therapy at 3 o'clock. That gave me a window to search the house more thoroughly. I started with her dresser, checking the usual hiding spots for phones, notes, or anything else she might not want me to find. Nothing. Her jewelry box contained the usual collection of earrings and necklaces, plus a small key I didn't recognize. The key was interesting. It was too small for a house or car, more like something that would open a locker or a post office box. I photographed it and put it back where I'd found it. Next, I checked her laptop, which she usually left on the kitchen counter. It was password protected, but I knew Mina well enough to guess her usual combinations. Her mother's maiden name plus her birth year didn't work. Neither did our anniversary date or our address. Then I tried Rowan 2023, and the screen unlocked. My stomach dropped. She'd changed her password to her therapist's name. Her browser history showed multiple visits to Dr. Carrick's website, plus searches for emotional affair recovery and leaving a marriage. Her email contained several appointment confirmations from his office, but nothing that looked explicitly romantic. The real information was in her deleted items folder. There were dozens of emails from an address I didn't recognize: rktherapy@protonmail.com. The subject lines were innocuous enough: following up on our session, resources for your healing journey, checking in, but the content was anything but professional. The earliest email, from 3 months ago, started normally. "Mina, I wanted to follow up on some of the issues we discussed today regarding your feelings of isolation in your marriage. By last week, they'd evolved into something very different. I can't stop thinking about what you said yesterday. The way you described feeling invisible in your own home broke my heart. You deserve so much more than what you're settling for." And the most recent one, sent yesterday afternoon. "Our session today was incredible. I've never felt such a deep connection with someone. I know this is complicated, but I can't ignore what's happening between us. I photographed each email, then checked her sent items. Mina's responses were equally revealing. I feel like you're the only person who really sees me. I look forward to our sessions all week. You make me feel alive again. I know this is wrong, but I can't help how I feel about you. The final email in the chain, sent this morning, made my hands shake with anger. Last night was amazing. I can't wait to see you again this afternoon. Last night. While I was sitting in my office, thinking about surveillance equipment and legal strategies, my wife had been with her therapist, doing God knows what. I closed the laptop and sat in the kitchen, trying to process what I'd just learned. This wasn't just an emotional affair anymore. They'd crossed every professional and personal boundary that existed. Dr. Rowan Carrick wasn't just sleeping with his patient. He was actively encouraging her to leave her marriage while billing our insurance for the privilege. That's when I remembered what I used to do for a living. I'd spent 12 years investigating exactly this kind of misconduct. I knew how the medical board worked, what kind of evidence they needed, and how to build a case that would stick. I also knew that therapists who crossed boundaries with patients didn't usually stop at one. If Carrick was doing this with Mina, he'd probably done it before. I opened my laptop and started researching his background more thoroughly. His license was current, with no disciplinary actions on record. But that didn't mean much. Most patients never reported boundary violations, either because they didn't know how or because they were too embarrassed to come forward. The state medical board's website had a section for filing complaints, complete with downloadable forms and detailed instructions. I'd written those instructions myself, back when I worked for the board. They were designed to be thorough enough to build a solid case while being accessible to ordinary patients who might not understand the legal complexities involved. I downloaded the forms and started filling them out. The complaint form asked for detailed information about the practitioner, the nature of the misconduct, and any supporting evidence. I had Carrick's license number, office address, and enough documentation to support charges of misconduct, boundary violations, and exploitation of the therapeutic relationship. But I needed more than just the emails. I needed witnesses, corroborating evidence, and ideally, other victims who would be willing to testify. That's when I remembered the reviews on his website, particularly the one from Jennifer M., who'd written about how Dr. Carrick had changed her life in ways she never expected. I pulled up the review again and studied the language more carefully. He helped me understand that I deserved more than I was settling for. Sounded like something a therapist might say to justify an affair. Our sessions were always the highlight of my week, suggested a level of emotional attachment that went beyond normal therapeutic boundaries. The review was from 8 months ago, which meant Jennifer M. had been seeing Carrick around the time he started treating Mina. If he was running the same playbook with multiple patients, there might be a pattern of misconduct going back months or years. I needed to find Jennifer M. and any other former patients who might have had similar experiences. The medical board complaint process was designed to be confidential, but that didn't mean I couldn't do some preliminary investigation on my own. I had contacts at the board, former colleagues who might be willing to share information off the record. I also had something most complainants didn't: 12 years of experience investigating exactly this kind of case. Dr. Rowan Carrick had picked the wrong patient to seduce. I was going to destroy him. Finding Jennifer M. turned out to be easier than I'd expected. The review platform required verified accounts, and a little digging through public records revealed that Jennifer Morrison had filed for divorce 6 months ago, citing irreconcilable differences. Her ex-husband's counterfiling mentioned adultery. Jennifer worked as a nurse at Maine Medical Center, which gave me an easy way to make contact. I called the hospital's main number and asked to speak with her about a patient compliance matter. "This is Jennifer Morrison," she said when the call went through. "Ms. Morrison, my name is Elias Corven. I'm a healthcare compliance consultant, and I'm looking into some concerns regarding Dr. Rowan Carrick. I understand you were a patient of his." There was a long silence. What kind of concerns? Professional boundary issues. I'd prefer not to discuss the details over the phone, but I think you might have some relevant information. I don't know what you're talking about. Ms. Morrison, I used to work for the state medical board. I know how these situations work, and I know how difficult they can be for patients. If Dr. Carrick crossed professional boundaries with you, you're not alone, and you're not at fault. Another silence, longer this time. Can you meet me after work? Somewhere private? Of course. Where would be convenient? There's a coffee shop on Forest Avenue called Grind. I get off at 7. I'll be there. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few college students with laptops and a couple having what looked like a breakup conversation in the corner. Jennifer Morrison was easy to spot. Mid-30s, brown hair, tired eyes that suggested she'd been through something difficult recently. Mr. Corven, she said when I approached her table. Thank you for meeting with me. I know this isn't easy. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug like she was trying to warm herself. You said you used to work for the medical board? 12 years as an investigator. I handled cases involving professional misconduct, boundary violations, that sort of thing. And you think Rowan violated boundaries with me? I think he's currently violating boundaries with another patient, and I'm trying to determine if there's a pattern of misconduct. Jennifer stared into her coffee for a long moment. What happens if I tell you what happened? That depends on what you're comfortable with. If you're willing to file a formal complaint, the medical board will investigate. If not, anything you tell me stays between us. He could lose his license? If the board finds evidence of misconduct with patients, yes. Almost certainly. She looked up at me for the first time since I'd sat down. Good. He destroyed my marriage. Over the next hour, Jennifer told me a story that was disturbingly similar to what I'd seen in Mina's emails. It had started with normal therapy sessions after her father's passing. Dr. Carrick had been supportive, understanding, and gradually more personal in his approach. He said I had beautiful eyes, Jennifer said. That seems so stupid now, but at the time, it felt like the most important thing anyone had ever said to me. My husband never noticed things like that. The compliments had escalated to longer sessions, then to personal conversations that had nothing to do with therapy. Carrick had started sharing details about his own life, his own struggles, creating a sense of intimacy that Jennifer had mistaken for genuine connection. He said he'd never met anyone like me, that I was special, different from his other patients. He made me feel like the most important person in the world. The physical relationship had started with longer hugs at the end of sessions, then progressed to kissing, and eventually to contact in his office. Jennifer had been so caught up in the emotional intensity that she hadn't recognized it as exploitation until much later. I left my husband for him, she said quietly. I thought we were going to be together. But as soon as my divorce was final, he started pulling away, said he needed to maintain professional boundaries. How long did the relationship last? 6 months. But the damage was permanent. My ex-husband won't speak to me. My kids barely talk to me. I lost everything for someone who threw me away as soon as it became inconvenient. I took notes as she talked, documenting dates, locations, and specific incidents that would support a formal complaint. Jennifer's story provided a clear pattern of predatory behavior, targeting vulnerable patients, exploiting the therapeutic relationship, and discarding victims once they'd served his purposes. Ms. Morrison, would you be willing to file a formal complaint with the medical board? Will other people know about it? The complaint process is confidential, but if it goes to a hearing, you might need to testify publicly. I know that's difficult, but it's the only way to stop him from doing this to other women. She nodded slowly. There are other women? At least one that I know of. Possibly more. Then yes, I'll file a complaint. Someone needs to stop him. I gave Jennifer my contact information and explained the next steps in the complaint process. She agreed to document her experiences in detail and gather any evidence she still had: appointment records, receipts, any communications from Carrick. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop and reviewed my notes. Jennifer's story corroborated everything I suspected about Carrick's methods. He was a predator who used his professional position to manipulate vulnerable women into relationships. But one victim wouldn't be enough to guarantee a successful complaint. The medical board required clear evidence of misconduct, preferably with multiple witnesses and documented patterns of behavior. I needed to find more victims. Over the next week, I used my professional contacts to research Carrick's patient history. A friend at the insurance commission provided me with billing records that showed unusual patterns. Certain patients had significantly more sessions than normal, often scheduled at the end of the day when the office would be empty. Cross-referencing those records with public information, I identified 3 other potential victims. 2 had filed for divorce within months of ending therapy with Carrick. The 3rd had moved out of state shortly after her sessions ended. I contacted each of them using the same approach I'd used with Jennifer, identifying myself as a compliance consultant investigating boundary violations. 2 of them hung up immediately. The 3rd, a woman named Rachel Winters, agreed to meet. Rachel's story was nearly identical to Jennifer's. Vulnerability exploited, boundaries crossed gradually, relationship disguised as therapeutic breakthrough, abandonment when the relationship became inconvenient. "I thought I was going crazy," Rachel told me. "I kept wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing, if I'd misunderstood what was happening. He made me feel like it was my fault, like I'd seduced him instead of the other way around." That's a common reaction. Predators are skilled at making their victims feel responsible for the abuse. Is that what it was? Abuse? Yes. What Dr. Carrick did to you was exploitation. It's a serious crime in most states, and it's definitely grounds for losing his medical license. Rachel agreed to file a complaint as well. With 2 victims willing to testify and documented evidence of Carrick's methods, I had the foundation of a strong case. But I still needed to deal with the immediate problem. My wife was currently involved with a predator who was exploiting her just like he'd exploited Jennifer and Rachel. I could file the complaint immediately and let the medical board handle the investigation. That would take months, maybe years, and Mina would continue seeing Carrick in the meantime. Or I could take a more direct approach. I decided to do both. The medical board complaint was filed on a Thursday morning. I hand-delivered it to the board offices in Augusta, along with supporting documentation from Jennifer and Rachel. My former supervisor, Dr. Patricia Vance, was still running the investigations unit, and she agreed to expedite the review process. "This looks solid, Elias," she said after reviewing the complaint. "Multiple victims, documented pattern of behavior, clear evidence of exploitation. We'll open a formal investigation immediately." "How long before you can take action?" "Emergency suspension of his license. 2 weeks if everything checks out. Full hearing within 60 days. "Good. He's currently exploiting another patient. The sooner you can stop him, the better." Patricia nodded grimly. "We'll make this a priority." That afternoon, I drove to Dr. Carrick's office. It was in a converted Victorian house on Main Street, the kind of place that was supposed to feel warm and welcoming. Instead, it just looked like a perfect cover for predatory behavior. The receptionist was a young woman who probably had no idea what her boss was doing in his private sessions. I told her I was there to discuss a billing matter and asked to speak with Dr. Carrick directly. "He's with a patient right now," she said. "Can I schedule you an appointment?" "I'll wait." I sat in the waiting room, surrounded by the usual therapy office decorations, motivational posters, plants that were probably supposed to be calming, magazines about wellness and self-improvement. The whole place felt like a carefully constructed lie. At exactly 4 o'clock, the office door opened, and Mina walked out. She saw me immediately, and her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, fear, and finally anger. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "Waiting for you," I said calmly. "We need to talk." Dr. Carrick appeared in the doorway behind her. He was exactly what I'd expected, handsome in a practiced way, with the kind of concerned expression that probably made his patients feel understood. When he saw me, his face shifted to professional curiosity. "Is everything all right, Mina?" he asked. "This is my husband," Mina said, her voice tight with tension. "Ah." Carrick stepped forward and extended his hand. "Dr. Rowan Carrick. Mina's told me so much about you." I stood up but didn't take his hand. "I'm sure she has, just like she's told me so much about you." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken tension. Carrick's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing something calculating underneath. "Perhaps we should step into my office," he said. "If there are concerns about Mina's treatment, I'm happy to address them." "Oh, there are concerns," I said, "but they're not about her treatment." Mina grabbed my arm. "Elias, let's go. We can talk about this at home." "Actually, I think we should talk about it here, in front of Dr. Carrick, since he's so invested in your emotional well-being." Carrick's receptionist was watching the exchange with growing alarm. He noticed her attention and gestured toward his office. "Why don't we continue this conversation privately?" The three of us went into his office, a room that was clearly designed to put patients at ease. Soft lighting, comfortable furniture, diplomas on the walls that were supposed to inspire confidence. I wondered how many women he'd seduced in this room. "Mr. Corven," Carrick said, settling behind his desk, "I understand that therapy can be challenging for family members. It's natural to feel concerned when your spouse is working through difficult emotions." "Is that what you call it? Working through emotions?" Mina was sitting on the edge of her chair, looking like she wanted to run. "Elias, please, don't do this." "Don't do what? Don't ask questions about why my wife has a burner phone? Don't wonder why she's been lying about her therapy schedule? Don't investigate why she's changed her laptop password to her therapist's name?" Carrick's professional composure cracked slightly. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You've been having a relationship with my wife. You've violated every professional boundary that exists, and you've done it before with other patients." The room went completely silent. Mina stared at me in shock, and Carrick's face went pale. "That's a very serious accusation," Carrick said carefully. "It's not an accusation. It's a statement of fact. I have the emails, the text messages, the testimony of other victims. I also have 12 years of experience investigating exactly this kind of misconduct." I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo of the medical board complaint. "I filed a formal complaint this morning. The board will be suspending your license within 2 weeks." Carrick stood up abruptly. "I think this meeting is over." "You're right. It is." I looked at Mina, who was staring at me with a mixture of horror and disbelief. "The question is, what happens next?" "Elias," she said quietly, "can we please go home?" "Of course. We have a lot to discuss." As we left the office, I could feel Carrick watching us. He was probably already planning damage control, trying to figure out how to minimize the fallout from my complaint. He had no idea what was coming. The drive home was silent, except for the sound of Mina crying. I didn't try to comfort her. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. "How long have you known?" she asked as we pulled into our driveway. "About a week. Long enough to build a case that will destroy his career." "Why didn't you just talk to me? Would you have told me the truth?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Inside the house, we sat in the living room like strangers. Mina looked small and broken, nothing like the confident woman who'd been sneaking around behind my back for months. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends on what you want to happen." "I don't know. I'm so confused." "Let me help clarify things for you. Dr. Carrick is a predator who targets vulnerable women. He's done this before with at least 2 other patients that I know of. You're not special to him. You're just another victim he manipulated into thinking you were in love. That's not true. What we have is real. What you have is a professional relationship that he exploited for his own gratification. The moment his license gets suspended, he'll disappear from your life like you never existed. Mina was crying harder now. You don't understand. He makes me feel alive. He sees me in ways you never have. He sees you as an easy target, just like he saw Jennifer Morrison and Rachel Winters. Who are they? His previous victims. Women who thought they were special, who left their husbands for him, who got discarded the moment they became inconvenient. The truth was starting to sink in. I could see it in her face, the dawning realization that she'd been played by someone who was very good at playing vulnerable women. I need to call him, she said, reaching for her phone. Go ahead, but I guarantee he won't answer. Predators don't stick around when their victims become liabilities. She dialed his number and waited. The call went straight to voicemail. Rowan, it's me. Please call me back. We need to talk. She tried 3 more times with the same result. He's probably talking to his lawyer, I said, trying to figure out how to minimize the damage from the medical board investigation. Mina looked at me with something approaching hatred. You destroyed everything. No, he did. I just documented it. What do you want from me? I want you to understand what really happened here. You were exploited by a predator who used his professional position to manipulate you into a relationship. That's not love, that's abuse. And then what? We just pretend none of this happened? I don't know. That's something we'll have to figure out. But even as I said it, I knew our marriage was over. Too much damage had been done, too many lies told, too much trust broken. The question wasn't whether we could fix things. The question was how much more damage would be done before we both accepted reality. Mina went upstairs without another word. I sat in the living room, listening to her move around in our bedroom, probably packing a bag. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia at the medical board. Expedited review complete. Emergency suspension approved. Carrick's license will be suspended Monday morning. I texted back, thank you. It was over. Dr. Rowan Carrick's career was finished, and my marriage was probably finished too. But at least no other women would fall victim to his manipulation. That had to count for something. Mina left that night, taking a suitcase and her laptop. She said she was going to stay with her friend Lana while she figured things out. I didn't try to stop her. The house felt different without her in it. Quieter, but also somehow cleaner. Like a source of contamination had been removed. I spent the weekend cleaning out her office, boxing up her things, and trying to decide what I wanted to do next. On Monday morning, Dr. Carrick's license was officially suspended. The state medical board issued a public notice that he was under investigation for professional misconduct and boundary violations. By Tuesday, the story had been picked up by the local newspaper. I was in my office when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Mina's number. Have you seen the news? She said without preamble. About Dr. Carrick? Yes. They're calling him a predator. They're saying he exploited patients. That's because he is a predator, and he did exploit patients. The reporter called me. She wanted to know if I had any comment about my relationship with him. What did you tell her? I hung up. But she knows Elias. Somehow she knows about us. Medical board complaints are public record once they reach the hearing stage. If you're listed as a victim, your name will come out eventually. A victim? I'm not a victim. Yes, you are. You just haven't accepted it yet. There was a long silence. Rowan still won't return my calls. He's probably been advised by his lawyer not to contact any of his former patients. It would look like witness tampering. So that's it? It's just over? That's how predators work, Mina. They use people and discard them when they become inconvenient. Stop calling him that. What would you prefer? Therapist? He's not that anymore. Lover? He never was. Predator is the most accurate term. She hung up. The next few days brought a steady stream of developments. The newspaper ran a follow-up story about the investigation, including interviews with Jennifer Morrison and Rachel Winters. Both women spoke publicly about their experiences with Carrick, describing the pattern of manipulation and exploitation that had destroyed their marriages and their trust in mental health professionals. A third woman came forward after the story ran, then a fourth. It turned out that Dr. Carrick had been running his predatory scheme for years, targeting vulnerable women and using his professional authority to manipulate them into relationships. The medical board scheduled a formal hearing for the following month. Carrick's lawyer tried to negotiate a settlement that would allow him to surrender his license without admitting wrongdoing, but the board refused. There were too many victims, too much evidence, and too much public attention. Mina called me again the day before the hearing. "I need to know something," she said. "Did you plan this? The whole investigation, the complaint, everything?" "I planned to find out if you were having an affair. Everything else followed from that." "But you knew what would happen to him. You knew it would destroy his career." "Yes." "And you did it anyway." "Yes." "Why?" "Because he's a predator who was exploiting my wife and other vulnerable women. Because someone needed to stop him. And because I had the skills and knowledge to do it." "What about me? What about what I wanted?" "What you wanted was based on manipulation and lies. You fell in love with someone who was using you. That's not your decision to make." "You're right. It wasn't my decision. It was the medical board's decision, based on evidence of professional misconduct. You could have just asked for a divorce." "I could have. But then he would have moved on to the next victim, and the next one after that. This way, he's finished." The hearing was held in a conference room at the state office building in Augusta. I sat in the back, watching as Jennifer, Rachel, and two other women testified about their experiences with Dr. Carrick. Their stories were remarkably similar: vulnerability exploited, boundaries crossed gradually, relationships disguised as therapeutic breakthroughs. Mina was called as a witness, but refused to testify. Her lawyer argued that she was still processing the trauma of the relationship and wasn't ready to speak publicly about her experiences. The board didn't need her testimony. The evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Carrick's license was permanently revoked. He was also referred to the district attorney's office for possible criminal charges related to exploitation. After the hearing, I ran into Jennifer Morrison in the parking lot. "Thank you," she said. "I never would have had the courage to come forward if you hadn't contacted me. You did the hard part. All I did was connect the dots. Still, you stopped him from hurting other women. That matters." She was right. It did matter. I drove home thinking about what came next. The house was still empty, still quiet. Mina hadn't been back since the night she left, though she'd sent Lana to pick up more of her things. My phone rang as I was pulling into the driveway. Unknown number. "Mr. Corven? This is Dr. Rowan Carrick." I almost hung up, but curiosity got the better of me. "You're not supposed to be contacting me." "I know, but I needed to say something. Make it quick. You destroyed my life." "No, you destroyed your own life when you decided to exploit vulnerable patients." Mina came to me willingly. I didn't force her to do anything. "You used your professional authority to manipulate a vulnerable woman into a relationship. That's exploitation, regardless of whether she thought she was willing." "She loves me. She loves the person you pretended to be. That person never existed. You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I spent 12 years investigating people like you. You're not special. You're just another predator who got caught. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to appeal the board's decision." "Good luck with that. You'll need it." He hung up. That night, I sat in my office and wrote out a timeline of everything that had happened over the past month, from finding the burner phone to watching Carrick's license get revoked. It read like a case study in how to investigate and prosecute professional misconduct. Maybe that's what it was. My phone buzzed with a text from Mina. I saw the news about the hearing. I hope you're satisfied. I typed back, I'm satisfied that he can't hurt anyone else. What about us? What about us? Do you want to try to work things out? I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Do you? I don't know. Everything is so messed up. Yes, it is. Can we talk? In person? If you want to. Tomorrow? At the house? Okay. But I already knew how that conversation would go. Too much had been broken, too much trust destroyed. We might be able to have a civil divorce, maybe even maintain some kind of friendship eventually. But our marriage was over. The only question was whether Mina was ready to accept that reality. I suspected she wasn't. But that was her problem to solve, not mine. I'd done what I set out to do. I'd stopped a predator from exploiting vulnerable women. Everything else was just collateral damage. Mina came to the house the next evening, looking smaller than I remembered. She'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. Thank you for agreeing to see me, she said as we sat in the living room. Of course. I've been thinking about what you said, about Rowan being a predator. And? I talked to one of the other women, Jennifer Morrison. She called me after the hearing. That was interesting. What did she say? She told me about her experience with him, how it started, how it progressed, how it ended. Mina's voice was quiet, almost defeated. It was exactly the same as what happened with me. I'm sorry you had to learn that. Are you? Sometimes I think you enjoyed watching me figure out that I'd been manipulated. I didn't enjoy any of this, Mina, but you needed to understand what really happened. I feel so stupid. You're not stupid. You were vulnerable, and he exploited that vulnerability. It's what predators do. Jennifer said he told her the same things he told me, that she was special, that he'd never felt this way about a patient before, that what they had was real. Standard predator playbook. Make the victim feel chosen, special, different from all the others. Mina was crying now, but quietly, like she was too exhausted for dramatic emotion. I really thought he loved me. I know. I was ready to leave you for him. I was ready to throw away 8 years of marriage for someone who was just using me. But you didn't. You found out the truth before you made that mistake. Only because you forced me to see it. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, it was getting dark, and I could hear our neighbors coming home from work, living their normal lives that hadn't been blown apart by predators and betrayal. What happens now? Mina asked finally. That depends on what you want to happen. I want to go back in time and make different choices. We can't do that. I know. She wiped her eyes with a tissue. I think we should get divorced. It wasn't a surprise, but hearing her say it still felt like something heavy settling in my chest. Okay. I can't expect you to forgive me for what I did, and I don't think I can live with the shame of what happened. Shame about being manipulated by a predator? Shame about being willing to throw away our marriage for someone I barely knew. That's different. Is it? Yes. One is about being victimized. The other is about making bad choices. You can feel ashamed about the choices without feeling ashamed about being victimized. I don't know how to separate those things. Maybe therapy would help. Real therapy with someone who doesn't exploit patients. She almost smiled at that. Maybe. We spent the next hour talking about practical things, dividing assets, selling the house, figuring out the logistics of ending a marriage. It was surprisingly civilized, considering everything that had happened. There's something I need to tell you, Mina said as she was getting ready to leave. What? Rowan called me yesterday. before the hearing. What did he say? He wanted me to lie, to testify that our relationship was my idea, that I seduced him instead of the other way around. What did you tell him? I told him to go to hell. Good. He said if I didn't help him, he'd make sure everyone knew I was a willing participant, that he'd destroy my reputation the same way you destroyed his. And I realized that you were right about him. Someone who really loved me wouldn't threaten me like that. She left a few minutes later, taking the last of her things from the bedroom. I watched from the window as she loaded her car, thinking about how different this moment was from what I'd expected a month ago. A month ago, I'd thought I was investigating a simple affair. I'd had no idea I was about to bring down a predator who'd been exploiting women for years. My phone rang as Mina's car disappeared around the corner. Elias, this is Patricia Vance from the medical board. Hi, Patricia. What's up? I wanted to give you an update on the Carrick case. The district attorney's office has decided to file criminal charges: exploitation, abuse of professional authority, fraud. He's looking at serious prison time. That's good news. It is, and I wanted to thank you for bringing this to our attention. Your investigation was thorough, professional, and exactly what we needed to build a solid case. I had good training. You did. Have you ever thought about coming back to the board? We could use someone with your skills. Thanks, but I'm happy with consulting. Well, if you ever change your mind, let me know. After I hung up, I sat in my empty house and thought about what came next. The divorce would be finalized in a few months. I'd probably sell the house and move somewhere smaller, maybe closer to the coast. Dr. Rowan Carrick would go to prison, and his victims would hopefully get some sense of justice and closure. And I'd go back to my consulting work, helping healthcare practices stay compliant with regulations and avoid the kind of misconduct that had destroyed Carrick's career. It wasn't a happy ending, exactly, but it was a just one. Sometimes that's the best you can hope for. 6 months later, I was reading the newspaper over coffee when I saw a small item on the back page. Former therapist sentenced to 5 years in prison for patient exploitation. Dr. Rowan Carrick had pleaded guilty to multiple charges related to exploitation of patients. He'd also agreed to pay restitution to his victims and surrender any remaining professional credentials. Justice served. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for everything you did. Starting fresh in California. Jennifer. I texted back. Good luck. Another text, this one from Mina. Saw the news about Rowan. How are you doing? I'm fine. How are you? Better. In therapy with someone who actually follows professional boundaries. Weird concept, right? Very weird. Take care of yourself, Elias. You too. I finished my coffee and went to my office to start work on a new case. A hospital in Portland was having problems with billing compliance, and they needed someone to review their procedures and recommend changes. It was exactly the kind of work I was good at: finding problems, documenting solutions, and making sure people followed the rules that were designed to protect everyone involved. Some people might call it boring. I called it justice. And sometimes justice was exactly what the world needed. You.